Then there's the other side, which might be waiting too long to talk about what you're looking for and what you need, and you don't really want to discuss that because that's scary
Mm-hmm.
and that's uncertain and that's
Maybe
vulnerable.
I'll be disappointed. Maybe I'll hear something I don't want to hear.
Maybe I'll hear exactly what I want to hear. And that
Mm-hmm.
might be the worst thing ever.
Mm. All right. Hello. Welcome back to the Evergreen Rx. I'm your host, Hayden, licensed mental health therapist, Cancer Moon, and the first to get deep at any party. And I'm welcoming back Ben, my wonderful friend who some of you guys may recognize from last season, where we yapped all about the crushing phase. It's episode 13, most popular episode. You guys love it. So I had to bring him back. And if you haven't listened to that, just go check it out first, then come back here because today is a natural continuation on the single to wifed up pipeline. So we're going to be talking all about making it official, moving the relationship out of talking phase purgatory, talking about the vulnerability of letting, your romantic interest really get to know who you are and getting to see more of who they really are. Sometimes the struggle that can come about with that. And before I get ahead of myself, though, I'm going to take a second to reintroduce Ben to any of you guys who don't know him. He is a LPCA, so he's a fellow therapist. We met in counseling school and we became quick friends because we realized we had all the same hot takes on the counseling field and also have both raging cases of imposter syndrome.
Mm.
So, yeah, we really connected over that. And Ben has a newly minted private practice of his own
Mm.
and also makes great content on Instagram and TikTok. So he's an awesome person to follow, and I'll have it all linked below. But that's a little bit about him. And so, how's it to be back, Ben?
Fantastic.
Yeah. Do you think I covered you? Do you have anything else you want to share
Um,
about yourself
about me and my
before?
life? No, not for this.
Awesome.
I like the pipeline quote of from talking stage to wifed up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
good representation.
Yeah, I love a pipeline metaphor. So, anyway, let's do our own little. Hopefully, at this point, all of you guys have actually followed my instructions and you've gone and listened to episode 13.
It's okay if
So,
you don't.
it's okay if you don't. We're going to recap it for you anyway. So, let's just kind of talk about how we got to this stage. So,
Mhm.
the intention of this episode is talking about like really the beginning stages of what we'd call more of a relationship. Like, you're
Mhm.
exclusive at this point, like you're moving towards um, you know, getting to know each other on a deeper level, meeting important people in each other's lives. Like
Mhm.
it's more of an official thing. So before that point, we talked about the crushing phase,
Right.
the infatuation, the oh my gosh, are we going to get together? Are we not? Are they going to talk to me? Are they
Mhm.
not?
I think a big difference here is like expectations of one another, where like maybe you're not monogamous yet, maybe you're moving towards monogamy, maybe you're there. We'll kind of like talk about that phase as well, I
Mhm.
believe. But a difference is the expectation on the partner is you have a predictable response for the most part, as well as you're more comfortable addressing when you're not happy with something that transpired, and you have the capacity to have that conversation with the other, and it's
Right.
not the death of the relationship.
Yeah, so it's hard because I feel like we have to like use this one blanket term relationship, but we're
Mm-hmm.
almost describing like two different things here. That's a big thing that we talked about in the crushing phase episode is like, you know, when you're first getting to know someone or you're like gone on like one or two dates and like it's its own unique type of experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's like completely different than being in a romantic relationship, like that more dating stage. It's completely different than a friendship. It's like got a real intensity to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing that that kind of like led us to this point, there was this intensity. We faced some of the challenges of attachment that either wants to pull really close
Mm-hmm.
and kind of speed up the process, or people that want to attachment that wants to push a little bit further away and slow down, or maybe is dealing with some of the fears around close connection.
Right.
Those things have been navigated, and now we're facing a new set of challenges. What do you think some of those challenges are?
Emotional vulnerability.
Mm.
For starters, which I think is most of it.
Yeah, that's like in a nutshell, honestly.
Yeah. I think, I mean, that could be the title of this one, is like true emotional vulnerability. Of, you could argue, in the crushing phase, there's not a lot of that. And once you get to this this higher level of relationship and expectations and labels, and relying on someone, that's when you're actually going to have to be vulnerable with how you react to them and what you show to them.
Yeah. Yeah, so emotional vulnerability, that's really like what we're facing in this stage. And I think one of the first directions to go in, probably one of the first real tests of this emotional vulnerability, is having the kind of conversation where you're making it exclusive. You're talking about kind of what are we, what do we want to be, how is this going for you. So this is a hot button topic, right? I think a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on when to have this conversation, how to have this conversation, when it's too early. Is there possibly even a too late? What do you think?
I don't know if there is technically a too early. And what I mean by that is, I think there is merit to showing up in the space saying, this is what I'm looking for. Whether it is a monogamous relationship or children. A lot of relationships end up not working out because they realize one person wants a child and one person doesn't want a child. So when it comes to too early about like, what are we and what am I looking for, I don't think that exists. However, if I can go more into that, it's, you can say what you want, and that's kind of all you can do. And then you have to choose whether you want to remain there or not. And I think this is my first hot take, is if you show up in a scenario and you say, I'm looking for a monogamous relationship, and you go on a date with someone, they're like, that's actually not what I have experience in, and I'm looking for non-monogamy.
Bye-bye.
Maybe.
I know.
Let's say you continue to see them, and then you're moving towards a more serious space. And like, this is when you actually start to get vulnerable. Like, actually, I do want something with you, and our values are different here. What do we do now? What's the conversation that we have to have? And this is where it's like, what are we and what are we looking for? And I think, I don't think it's anybody's fault when those values misalign. And this is why like too early, too late is important, because I think it's important to start with that.
Yeah.
But if you wait too long and you're like, oh, actually, I don't want a monogamous, like, that can be very blindsiding.
I guess what you're talking about here, too, is almost like kind of informed consent on the dating process. Of like, we love that.
Yeah.
That idea of like, okay, so if we say first or second date, you know, some people might absolutely lose their fucking mind that I even suggest first date. You might have a conversation like, oh, I do want kids one day, or like, this is what I'm looking for in a relationship or something. Like, just generally, like, kind of.
I think that's fine, though.
I think it's fine, too, but I'm just going to say
I kind of encourage it. I don't know.
I mean, it seems like it's a better use of time, kind of, and more informed consent in what you're getting into, because, you know, everybody develops feelings at different rates, but you can have a really amazing first date with someone and develop some like strong initial feelings, and that's taxing to like to keep leaning into those feelings if maybe there's some big unknowns out there that could potentially lead to hurt. Because if you say something like, you know, I'm looking for a monogamous relationship, and the other person's like, I don't really see that for myself, you're an adult, and now you get to decide whether or not you are willing to make the choice and the responsibility for yourself on continuing to see them or not.
And this is where we can pull in attachment on this of, you know, maybe you might lean towards too soon on this conversation. And so like I just to like reiterate, I don't think there's ever too soon to share what you're looking for and what
Yeah.
you want. There is too soon to say take it or leave it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to do this. Like there's no way around this, no ifs, ands, or buts. Different stages of life, different contexts, maybe that is what you need. That might be a little more anxious leaning.
Yeah.
That might be more, I need you to agree to my terms or else I don't feel safe here.
Right. I can't bear the discomfort and the uncertainty
Uh-huh.
at this point.
Yeah. And then there's the other side, which might be waiting too long to talk about what you're looking for and what you need. And you don't really want to discuss that because that's scary
Mm-hmm.
and that's uncertain and that's vulnerable.
Maybe I'll be disappointed. Maybe I'll hear something I don't want to hear.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll hear exactly what I want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
That might be the worst thing ever.
Mm.
And like, you could say this is more avoidant.
Yeah. I think that something that you're saying is reminding me of a comment that I got on a TikTok that I just thought was so good.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I think, a comment on like a video from my episode about like green flags, which was last season. And the person was like, because I was talking about, like, I don't think that there's a too early to talk about what you want.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between what I personally want and like what we are and what we have
Yeah.
and whatever. That there's timing to that.
Uh-huh.
But when you talk about what you want, I was kind of saying like some people really see that as kind of a taboo or whatever. And this commenter was like, I think that people sometimes don't want to talk about what they want because they know they're not going to get it, or this other person is like not going to match them on that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like not ready for that conversation. Like they're not like ready to basically look at their responsibility to say, okay, this isn't what I want.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually do need to like close the door on this, or I do need to can stop seeing you if you really aren't, if we're really not on the same page on what we're looking for. People want to kind of be more, and I mean this in a loving way, a little bit more like victims of their circumstance of like, oh my God, and this guy just ended up being like a douche and like couldn't commit. And it's like, well, like maybe there were some signs earlier on.
Yeah.
Or if you would have had that conversation, there would have been like an adult to adult acknowledgement of like, oh, you're not looking for commitment? Oh, that's disappointing. Like, I wish, but that also means I need to have the responsibility on myself to like stop seeing you.
Yes, and that's like what I was looking for in the like too early side of things is like this is why you want to have these conversations, because then you have choices. Then you have known information, you're collecting this data, and you can do whatever you want with that. If you live in ignorance, there's a lot more freedom to be like, oh, I had no idea.
Yes.
And so as you move into more dating landscape with one another, I think a lot more of this comes up. And I wonder if you find people would be more ignoring of answers they don't like in this phase, or if that would have been more in the crushing area.
This is a good question.
Do you know what I mean?
What do you think? What would you think personally? Like, would you tend to ignore kind of things that don't seem like they're going to gel with you at the very beginning, or once you're a little bit more established with someone?
I think I would ignore them once I'm more established with someone.
I agree with you.
Like in early on, you know, I don't know, when I conceptualize a lot of this, I'd be like, what would I tell my friends? What is the story I'm writing? And like more narratively, what is the story I'm telling myself? And I go to a friend and I'm like, oh, they're this and they're that, and it's so wonderful. But also like they said this and that was really weird. And I didn't like that they said that, actually. And I would conceptualize later on of like, just more like gushing, I guess, if you're early on in the dating phase.
I think there's a little more of a protective aspect that kicks in too.
Once you've made the choice.
Yes.
Ah, yeah.
Now I don't want to go to my friends and be like, because I don't want them having some opinion that like where I'm like,
Hmm.
no, you don't get it. Like we're great. Like I'm really happy about this. And like I don't want you to get some perspective that I'm like, oh, they said this and it was kind of weird. And I feel like there's maybe less protection when you're just getting to know someone. Because also, like we talked about, like we're all a little bit like sanctioned delusional
Hmm.
during the crushing phase. So it's also like easier to lean into like how ridiculous and like all over the place those feelings are and they're so
Hmm.
up and down versus when things become a little more stabilized. I think some of those protective mechanisms. Crushing is almost, this is like, I don't know if I even believe this, but let's just put it out here as a hot take. I feel like crushing is almost like a positive crisis.
Hmm.
Like all your shit is like thrown up in the air. Like people are more willing to um try new things. Defenses might be like operating in a
Hmm.
different way because it's
Hmm.
just so like all encompassing it can be,
Yeah.
where I feel like there's a little bit more openness too. To be like, oh,
I
I didn't like, I don't know.
I would argue that's more of the early stages of dating.
Okay. I think openness, I mean, in terms of like with your friends, maybe not so much with that person, but
Uh-huh.
like openness to be like telling them everything and what you're thinking and everything that was said. And then it starts to decrease a little bit as you start to build a little more loyalty to the person that you're
Yeah,
seeing.
you've made a choice. You've put your stamp of approval on them. You've said, "Well, this is the person I'm choosing and this is what I want, and I'm going to make it sound like the best thing ever."
Yeah.
Why would I not do that?
Yeah.
This is like that's like there was potential to be emotionally vulnerable there. But we put protections in front of that by like not sharing that information. That's a little more dodging the reality, the complexity of the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and like more delusional,
Mm-hmm.
positive delusions. We're still there.
Mm-hmm. We got to
Mm.
bring it back. Positive.
Mm-hmm.
This definitely feels like even just thinking about this phase in dating, it does feel a little more calm waters. Like it's not calm waters, but
It's secure.
yeah, hopefully. It's
It's feeling secure.
feeling a little more secure. And so with that, I think also comes like I love that we just pivoted to this because I'm like, okay, we've already touched on attachments. We can't not touch on attachments, but like they're activated in
Mm-hmm.
all phases of dating, but the activation is different now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new flavor to it. And I'm wondering how those attachments are showing up. And like, even something I did
Mm.
want to ask you about is like kind of how to approach the conversation of like, are we going to be exclusive or like, how is this going?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, looking from an attachment angle, like, how do we think about approaching that conversation, timing that conversation, and practicing that emotional vulnerability at this stage? It's layered.
Yeah, I mean, my first answer is like, I don't really know. I don't really know when that's supposed to happen. Um, in a perfect world, it kind of naturally comes about through a progression of mutual escalations. If that,
Mutual escalations.
yeah, does that make sense
No, it
though? Do you know
does.
what I
It totally
mean?
does. It's like the least like sexy way of describing exactly what it is.
What's not sexy about that? Of like,
Mutual escalations.
oh my God, you invited me to like this event that your friends are at of or like, oh, I like have this extra ticket to this concert. Like now we're going to this public event together. Like it like keeps progressively like moving that direction. Then I think at one point one person not necessarily breaks, but there's this weird game of chicken of like, okay, well like we've been doing all these things
Uh-huh.
together. So what are we?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I like that you said that. Like it's like a game of chicken because it is like people are so perceptive in relationships. I think I'm learning this a lot more of like we really are very tuned in. Even people that don't feel like they're super tuned in are picking up on a lot more than we might give credit or bring to like the explicit like forefront.
Mm.
And this is one of those situations where something is becoming explicit that the tension of it has been felt leading up to it, most
Yeah.
likely. That there is a level of like, something's not being said. There's an elephant in the room. It's not like a
Mm-hmm.
bad elephant, but it's like, there might be like a silence where it's like, okay, like,
Mm-hmm.
who is gonna break? Who is gonna like kind of bring this forward? And I think on the attachment side of this,
Mm-hmm.
something where if there is a little bit more anxious attachment and tendencies, there might be the tendency before that tension is really at like a palpable level,
Mm-hmm.
when it's just very low level, to talk,
Yeah.
to be like, oh, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the opposite, like, I mean, I don't know if we can like draw so much, but the natural conclusion would be the opposite, is where the tension's kind of been like festering for a bit, and it starts to get a little more like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, who's gonna give up the ghost? Like, when
Yeah.
are we actually gonna, are we ever gonna talk about this?
Right. Something that came up for me as you were saying all of that is like, what a beautiful way to approach the situation is lean into your anxiety of like, oh, I'm feeling really anxious right now. Is there a question that I should be asking? It's like, oh, I'm feeling avoidant right now when it comes to like having that conversation. Does this mean I can just stay present and enjoy the dinner we're having together?
Yeah.
Does this mean I don't have to like put a label on it and I can just enjoy what they're
What's
telling me
happening
about their
right now?
day? Yeah. And the second thought I had is I think there is, when it comes to this game of chicken and like more anxious leaning, which is me a bit more, is like sometimes you don't have to say every thought that pops into your
Right.
head.
Right. You don't have to ask every question. You don't have to like confirm everything that you want, which, yeah, we both lean more towards anxious. And so we know that feeling well of like, I could just send him a text. I think we talked about this in our last
Mm-hmm.
episode. Like, let me just get that little bit of confirmation. But I think what you're saying, and it's not surprising to me that it comes back to this, because I'm noticing as we're talking about this like next phase of dating, that so much of what's in the crushing phase is present here with new
Mm-hmm.
flavors. And I'm sure if we talked about the next phase after this, it's all the same kind of stuff
Mm-hmm.
with new layers of depth to it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I feel like we talked about last time that's feeling prevalent again is the presence component of
Mm-hmm.
when things are bubbling up. If that feeling of like, okay, I've noticed, I kind of want to talk to them about us specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Being present with that, okay, I'm noticing this desire. Like, does it feel like it's been around for a while, or is
Uh-huh.
this new? Can I sit with this a little longer, or is it
Mm-hmm.
pressing? Does it
Mm-hmm.
feel like I'm not bringing this up, not because I'm just wanting to sit on it longer, but because I'm anxious of the answer that I might
Mm-hmm.
get? Those are good questions to ask
Great
in
questions.
thinking about like when to bring this up
Mm-hmm.
or how you would want to, because I think there's also different, like, there's like almost scaffolding of like
Uh,
what the conversation can look like.
yeah.
A lot of times we talk about this as if it's like one set, like, hi Ben, like,
Yeah.
are we official or not? Like, and it's like sometimes maybe it's built up naturally enough to where both people are kind of like, oh, I'm so glad you said this, I'm glad you said that, I'm ready, let's talk about
Mm-hmm.
this. But there might be other times where it's like a soft landing into like, hey, like, I know we both talked about like our idea in the future is to like
Mm-hmm.
find like a monogamous relationship. Like, this is going really well for me. Like, well, how is it going for you?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it doesn't even have to be like a decision is made in that moment. It's like
Mm-hmm.
so variable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think those are all really good questions to be asking yourself throughout the process. And like you highlighted, an ideal scenario is like this should be, I don't like should, but like this can be an ongoing conversation. We set the goals date one, and then you continue seeing each other, and then you get to ask the question of like, are these goals something we can work towards? Is that something you want? How am I feeling about those? Do I want those? Is that something we want to keep putting time and effort into? Today's going to be different than tomorrow.
This is essentially hitting on a truth that I think most of us spend a lot of time avoiding about relationships, which is that essentially all they are is like a continual contract that's either getting explicitly or implicitly renewed. Even like our friendship, like
Mm-hmm.
me and you are just kind of like it's just kind of a known thing. Like each time one of us texts or something and the other responds or we see each other, we're just continuing the friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really have to talk about it.
No, there's less at stake than a romantic
And
relationship.
there's less at stake. There's nothing, like no big life changes happen where there'd be something that would maybe get in between us
Mm-hmm.
continuing a friendship. So, but it could technically end at any point.
Right.
Something could change at any point. I mean, one of us could even just move away and it would look different
Mm-hmm.
at any given point. And that's the same with relationships, that like always, even from the first date, from the first agreement to see each other, each subsequent time, each text, each communication is just kind of renewing that, like, this is continuing to work, let's keep going. This is continuing to work, let's keep going. There's just certain moments in romance where it becomes spoken about, it comes to the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we talked about this a little last time. Like, there can sometimes be this false sense of security when we get to like level up. Like, oh, now we're exclusive, so it's good, and I know what it's predictable.
Mm-hmm.
But that is ultimately false.
Well, it's always false.
Exactly.
There's no such thing as like security in another.
Yeah.
Trust is like the idea of trust is trusting yourself to be able to handle any situation that comes about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not trusting somebody else to do exactly what you want.
No, because I think that's faith. When you build a
Mm.
relationship with someone, you're having faith
Mm-hmm.
in who they are
Mm.
and what the consistency that you think they'll be able to continue to meet you
Mhm.
with. But there's no guarantee, and it's usually something that's like there's unknowables to it. There's some levels of like unknowable, and you just kind of continue to have faith and then
Mhm.
have trust in yourself that you can weather
Mhm.
whatever happens.
And so, like, as you're moving deeper into a relationship, there's more faith in this other person,
Mm-hmm.
which is scary and exciting for both people to work through. And that brings up like a whole other side of like attachment needs and issues as well.
So this is something that I want to talk about, because if we're gonna kind of the core theme that you articulated so well at the beginning is emotional vulnerability is really what
Mhm.
we're talking about. A huge part of this stage is getting to know each other more deeply, where it's not as possible to put your best face forward. It's going to get a little more real.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to get a little more real, ideally. You see each other maybe with more frequency, and that can bring a lot of stuff up.
Yeah, for sure. They become like multi-dimensional rather than like who you met on the first date.
Mm-hmm. How do we navigate that?
How do we navigate that? I don't know. With grace and compassion for enjoying the realities of another person who's trying to be vulnerable and trying to connect with you as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's so, I mean, just picture how scary it is for you getting to know somebody else in a relationship. And if you're feeling that way, well, then I really bet that they feel that way too.
Mm-hmm.
How do we navigate that, Hayden?
You're putting my own interview question.
Yeah, you
back
asked
on
me an impossible question.
I know. I think that it depends on what is coming up for each individual.
Mhm.
Of course, it's such a diplomatic answer.
Context.
I'm evading this. No, I think that it really depends, because some people might struggle a little more
Mhm.
with, at least initially, with like their more real sides coming out, with like, oh, I can't always like be this like perfect person that I like want them to see me as, and that
Mhm.
might tug on things of like, oh my god, I have flaws and imperfections, and like I don't want somebody to see that, and what if they don't love me? And
Mhm.
that can be very specific for certain people. And there can be other situations in which maybe because we've been hurt in the past. This is my take on it, is I think most people that are focused on like red flags and, the other person and what they're bringing to the table and do I like them or do I not? Usually I think they've just been hurt.
Mm.
And so they're scared and they don't want to be hurt again.
Yeah. No one
Fair.
wants to be hurt.
Exactly. Totally fair. But sometimes that can manifest in this fixation on the other person being perfect.
Uh-huh.
Because there's also a whole thing on attachment in that and the security we get from thinking that our caregivers can be perfect or whatever. But
Ooh, you're right.
we want that other person to be perfect sometimes when we have like fear over being hurt again.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be the main focus at first, coming up on like, oh my God, I thought that they were like this way all the time. And now I'm seeing that they're not, because they're human. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe this isn't the right person for me. Pull back, pull back, pull back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's two very different reactions.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're like mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
But I would approach managing them differently.
What are the two situations you're...
I think am I unlovable? Are they going to see my imperfections? Are they not going to choose me?
Mm-hmm.
And the other side is they're not perfect.
Right.
They're doing things and I'm afraid I'm going to be hurt.
Yeah, same
and I want to
coin.
pull the fuck back.
Mm-hmm.
And so both, I think there's inquisitiveness and curiosity around whatever's coming up that is, kind of essential.
Mm-hmm.
They both deserve a little bit of like reality checking. And I think of that more specifically with like when we're looking for another person
to be perfect.
There's some reality checking on that.
Oh, for sure. Well, this is emotional vulnerability avoidance from either attachment lens. Is the furthest away we can be from that, the better. And so if we can find something wrong in the other, in the outside, then we can stay safe. We don't have to show our ugly sides that exist, and we don't have to be vulnerable. Our vulnerability masks as protecting ourselves.
Yes. And again, we can kind of be the victim of our circumstance of, well, oh, they weren't right, or like I never meet the like right guys, or there's no one out there for me. Like, see, there's more proof. Because guess what? When we have proof that there's no one that's a good fit for us out there, then that means that we can stay single and thus safe. Even if safe doesn't necessarily always feel good or what we want, there is something to perpetuating a storyline of like, I just don't meet the right people. I don't meet the right person. That then it does allow us to stay in our comfort zone.
What is a right person? What is like the right fit? How do you find that? What does that look like? I don't know why my brain is going to this right now, but think of like people in your life in relationships that have had either infidelity or like high level crises and have continued to work and have stayed together. Maybe it's not a lot. Maybe it's only one or two, but somehow they've gone through that. And that's like kind of a whole other area. But the point I'm trying to make is it's a choice of like what the right person is and what you're willing to work with and whether you want to be in that or not.
Yes. And and every answer to this question is okay.
Yeah.
Like sometimes we have the bandwidth to be like, no, I'm gonna like really challenge myself in this way. I'm gonna deal with this stuff that's coming up for me. And other times it might be like, no, I don't have this. Good for you on knowing and making that conscious choice. But I love that you're bringing it to this, because I do think there is a real challenge that comes up in this phase of, go ahead.
Before you go there,
Yeah.
I have an answer to a question that I don't remember the exact question, but your words helped me get there, of right person to deal with. I think is when you notice you're not willing to work on that or put up with that. It's a great sign. Maybe you're not in the place for that, but if you're noticing you do want to work with it and you do want to learn more, put up with it is a strong term, but like navigate it together. That, if you're looking for what is a right fit, I would say that is what it is. Yeah.
You're willing to put that
You're
work
willing
in.
to try.
Because that's going to show up in every relationship.
Which is why, like, this might be the next question, but like you should start to show these less than beautiful sides of yourself. Not all at once, maybe, but like you want to show all these multiple dimensions early on so that you can be honest and vulnerable and see how you navigate the conflict around it.
Yes. Cuz that's exactly where I was going on the difference between like somebody being like, you know, as you get to know them more, like no, actually we really aren't a good match. I know more
Hmm.
about what they want and their like how they live their life, what their values are. And yeah, not every person is a great match with someone else. I wouldn't want to say that, but that's very different than the I'm not willing to put in the work. And if you
Hmm.
want a relationship, whatever that even looks like. I mean, it doesn't have to be like monogamous. It doesn't mean it leads to marriage. It doesn't, but a relationship that has some level of like agreement and commitment and trust and safety in it, um it takes work. It
Hmm.
just does. And there can be a really fine line on believing. I mean, every movie ever makes you believe that the right person,
Hmm.
your soulmate, it'll be so seamless, it won't take
Hmm.
any work, like it shouldn't. You shouldn't really have conflict. Like sometimes
Hmm.
people will be like, my grandparents were married for 70 years and they never fought. Guess
That's
what?
a
They're just shoving shit down. They
yeah,
just
that's a
didn't talk about
red
things.
flag. I'm sorry.
It's a red flag. I mean, like I love your grandparents. I nothing against them, but like I don't know if that's what we want to strive for.
No, I don't want
There's
that.
not a lot of intimacy there.
No, none.
You know, because the intimacy is through working through these things, having conflict, having risk that
Hmm.
results in conflicting with someone and caring enough to fight it out with them. You know, argue
Hmm.
it out with them and work it out.
Hmm.
Like that's where that real intimacy comes from. And having moments like that with someone, even in these like beginning stages, maybe just like a small conflict, like if you're screaming and yelling, that's a different situation probably at the beginning, but like to have these small conflicts and to work them out with someone, like I completely agree with you. That is your green signal that
Hmm.
like, okay, we're willing to put this in and we want to grow and change and like evolve through this relationship. Like,
That's just what like couples therapy is
mhm.
creating the space for you to safely navigate the conflict that inevitably arises with the underlying, well, not always. The underlying question is, do we want to stay together? And you're continuously deciding that.
Yes. Yeah. We've probably already touched on like a good amount of these, but I'm curious if there's more kind of toxic narratives
Mhm.
that are prevalent at this phase. There's a concept of like the are they the right person? Are they your person? That
Mhm.
can come up. Like narratives around
Mhm.
how soon you can get serious, when you should have the conversation,
Mhm.
like when you meet family. Like there's different kind of expectations and
Mhm.
timelines
Yeah.
that are really present.
And toxic areas of this is that,
Yeah, like if there's other narratives that you feel like you dismantle here.
yeah, I think something that comes up a lot here, like after invested time with one another, is the idea that somebody is wasting somebody else's time. And we've kind of touched on this in a lot of different capacities of being upfront with what you're looking for, having expectations for one another, and there's room to like have those conversations in the relationship to still go a totally different direction. And I think a lot of times it comes to the other side and somebody says, oh, well, he wasn't honest with what he was looking for, or
Mm.
she wasn't upfront about this very serious thing going on in her life, and
Mhm.
I don't want to deal with that. um and like, how dare they waste 2 months of my life where I could have been dating and maybe my right person was out there during that. And like,
Yeah.
that just like hurts me a lot on the
Mm.
inside, is that narrative. It's a very like scarce mindset to me,
Mhm.
is a this was a wasted opportunity. I didn't take anything away from it. I didn't learn anything, and I didn't grow, is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
When anytime you have the opportunity to get close to someone like that, if you're not taking away something from it, I don't know, I think that says more about you than them.
Yeah. I like that you brought this into because I think this phase is so like fragile,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a place where, you know, people can get here with someone, and it is promising and it's looking good, and
Mm-hmm.
then, it doesn't match and things do dissolve, and there can be a lot of kind of trial and error with
Mm-hmm.
this specific stage. And I have a friend who's in the dating scene right now, and we were kind of talking about this exact concept of like, oh, like it hurts, it's really hard
Mm-hmm.
when something that was so hopeful ends,
Yeah.
but reframing to be like, what did I get from this relationship? Like the fact that every person we interact with
Mm-hmm.
in our lives leaves some kind of mark.
Mm-hmm.
Even someone that you barely know can say one thing that just sticks with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And so like it's also kind of taking some of like the beauty, or having some of the gratitude for like the time spent with another person,
Mm-hmm.
and even like small things that maybe you just took from getting to know them and getting to like attempt like blending your lives together.
And I think this brings up the question for me is like, what do you have to lose? Like you already didn't have someone. And at the end of it, you don't have someone either. But in the middle of that, you have the opportunity to like show more of who you are, try something new on, or be challenged in a way you didn't expect. Like if I come out of talking to someone and I look at something differently, I got something.
Yeah.
And like saying that feels weird actually coming out of my mouth is like, what did you get out of it? It
Mm-hmm.
feels like
Like an
I don't know.
exchange.
Yeah, an exchange, and like that's a something to unpack in the dating scene. And on the other side of the exchange is like this expectation that we're gonna date for 3 years or get married. And
Mm-hmm.
so like when it fails or it doesn't work out or like someone misled the other, it is a waste and like going back to the word failure,
Mm-hmm.
and like where there's something in between all of this that exists.
Yeah, because if we look at every relationship, and this can be so easy to do with friendships too,
Mm-hmm.
as if they're not for life,
Mm-hmm.
they were a failure or
Mm.
whatever. It's like, whoa, that is like a high ass expectation. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and if we think about that, a lot of people end up with one person as their life partner.
Mm-hmm.
Then every relationship prior to whoever you spend, like, I don't know, the time leading up to your death with,
Yeah.
is technically failed.
Uh-huh.
Like, that is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and this is just like, I don't know, perspective work if you choose to do so. And I don't consider it like hyper positivity uh per se, but
Mm-hmm.
to get to that relationship, you have to go through everything to get there. I mean, you can adopt this perspective around trauma. It's no one wants it to happen. You don't wish it upon any of your friends or your clients that you're working with, and the person sitting in front of you wouldn't be who they are without it.
Mm-hmm.
This reality wouldn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And there's opportunities that will come out of it that wouldn't come out of it in a different world.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just the presence of like the reality that we're living in right now is the reality that exists, no matter how much it is or isn't what we want.
Acceptance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that this energy, like bringing this kind of energy and intention and perspective into a relationship, is just all the better when you're in these like fragile beginning stages. Okay, so my question for you is,
Uh-huh.
if you could put a billboard up for
Uh-huh.
everyone to see, or at least a lot of people,
Okay.
with one piece of advice for people moving into this phase or committing to something new, what would your billboard say?
For people like going into dating,
Yeah.
it's more about you than it is them. That's what I would put.
You want to give any more? You want to leave it there?
Well, that's what the billboard would say, but like for me, it's I don't know. I think so much of anxiety in relationship shows up as like, are they going to like me? Are they going to accept me? Are they going to love me? And I that's like more anxiety, and more avoidance is like, do I like them? Are they like able
Yeah.
to join my life? Do I want this to be a part of it? And I think there's a middle ground of like, I'm really enjoying myself.
Yeah.
I really like who I am around this person. I really like who they are around me, actually.
Mm.
It's really fun. Like, we really add a lot to each other's lives.
You actually kind of really nailed this prompt because it's a short, simple phrase that could be on a billboard. And at first glimpse, it's like it can be read as like sassy,
Oh,
or
it
it could be
is.
read, but then it also can be read like really compassionately, like
Mhm.
in it is more about you than it is about like you are also growing. You are
Mhm.
getting these new experiences. You're getting to open. If it could be something beautiful that's unfolding that you're getting to experience. Everything in life that we're going through is helping, I believe, to move us closer to ourselves.
Yes, love that phrase. Very good. Clip that.
Okay, well, I hope you guys loved this episode, and if you want me to have Ben back, then let me know, and I'll, um, force him at gunpoint and feed him soup. But,
Yes, more soup.
yeah, I'm hoping that we can continue kind of traversing down the relationship pipeline and share this with friends, please. And
What's up?
if you want to hear more, then let me know, and be sure to share your thoughts with us on Instagram, TikTok. I'll have Ben linked below, like I said, and go give him a follow. So thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks for
y'all.
being here.
Bye.